We're recording.
Okay. The meeting of the Charter Review Commission will come to order. This is Wednesday, September 9th at 7 p.m. And Mitch, could we have a roll call?
Sure. I know we got it. It's Stephanie.
Here.
Martin. Here. Mitch. I've got Steve G. I've got our other Steve H. And Ben. And Bart.
Okay. Thank you all for being here. First of all, I want to go back to last meeting, and Steve, we welcomed you to the group, but you didn't do what the rest of us did the first meeting, and that was to tell us a little bit about yourself and your connection to Pataskala and where you live and all that.
Well, I live in Pataskala. I retired from Pataskala PD, and I own a business in town now, the Clover Ranch. Been here a long time, 20 some odd years.
And how
Not as
long?
long as you.
Yes.
But a long time.
Okay.
I raised my family here.
How long were you on the police department?
I was with Pataskala for about 15 years. And I was with the fire department for a couple of years before that.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you.
And I always forget to put it on the agenda, as you'll notice, as the approval of the minutes. So Mitch very faithfully gets them out to us very quickly after our...
I won't have them out on Friday this week. I'm golfing. I'm out on Saturday though.
Well, I think we can probably adjust.
That'll be just fine.
Yeah, I think we'll be okay with that.
I'm the one making my moonshine.
So, I was presuming you all got them and you've read them, and would someone want to make a motion to approve the minutes?
Motion.
Second.
Okay, thank you. Any discussion on that? All in favor, say yes.
Yes. Yes.
Opposed, no? Okay, thank you. The purpose of tonight's meeting is to review chapters or articles 4 and 5 of the city charter. And we have no public present, so we'll move on. And we'll go to the review of what we did last meeting, which was 9, 10, and 11. And again, I'm assuming you all got your copies from Mitch of what we did do. Is there anything anywhere that you rethought, that you had further questions on, whether we kind of tend to go in order so that we can all keep our place? I will tell you this, Tim's not here tonight because he has been told to stay home. I guess he's got a son in college.
Yes.
And perhaps was around somebody who had COVID. So the whole family he was home on the weekend and Tim was around him a lot, and so he called the
Health department.
and they recommended that they all get tested and stay home. So he's not feeling bad. He doesn't think anything's wrong, but you never know. So in the interest of safety, he's not here. So there may be times tonight where we're slowed down a little bit because we don't have his expertise to give us a background or answer a question, but we'll make note of whatever we do and we're going to pass it on. Last time, we had several law-related questions that popped up, and so Tim agreed to ask the law director for a response. And so we do have responses to those. Do you want to hear the responses first and then come back to the review? Let's see where it starts. Okay. If the ability to access health care was offered to elected officials totally at their own expense, no cost whatsoever to taxpayers, is that an improper perk, or otherwise improper or illegal proposed change to the charter? If that language is added, should a notice of termination concurrent with term expiration be added? Previously, when this topic was discussed, you had indicated that it would take a charter change. They wanted to be sure that was true. That was Tim's question to the law director. The law director replied, "This is not an improper perk. However, this benefit could not be offered to any council member who is currently serving in office. It could be offered only to someone starting a new term in office. If offered to any council member before his or her term is up, this change, offering health care, would be seen as an improper and unethical interim change." Any comments, questions about that?
So when they run for re-election, if they were re-elected, then it would be, okay.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In several places, the charter, like 10.02, talks about a task or review shall take no more than 10 days. Is this 10 calendar days, 10 business days, what? Law director replied, days are days. Count them all unless otherwise noted.
So calendar days.
So if it says 10 business days, then you know it's 10 business days. If it says 10 days, it's 10 days, count them all. That simplifies it. In several instances, the commission was looking at removing language they thought was tedious or unnecessary and simply added the city of Pataskala would follow the laws of the state of Ohio and Licking County. The first was in section 9.02 nominations. They're wondering about removing the entire paragraph that contains the 1%, 3% reference and say that the number should be whatever the Board of Elections of Ohio and Licking County has adopted for those positions. They felt this was confusing. Law director's response: by removing the entire paragraph, you also remove the language about nonpartisan petitions and no primaries. Do they really want to get rid of that too? I'm not an election lawyer, but have one in my office if we need to consult on the ramifications of removing section 9.01. This is not confusing in that you look to the charter, whatever it says goes.
I think he asked that incorrectly. We didn't want to remove that entire chapter.
No,
We were
only
just
that
going to get rid of the
sentence.
last sentence.
The last half.
Right.
Because we have in there in the beginning, the exact language he said about nonpartisan. So we
Yeah.
still got that covered.
Okay, I'll report that back.
Right, I was confused when you were reading it, because I was like, the whole paragraph? I don't remember.
Yeah,
We
Yeah.
just need the whole.
Okay.
Just the part that I stroked through, I had to strike through on the
Right.
last sentence.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, so that one's that. 10.02 recall section. Similarly, there's a section in which identifies 20% of the electors that voted in the last election. The question was whether Ohio Revised Code specifically has a procedure for recalls, and if the commission could add a reference to those procedures and not be different than how the state does it. He said recall elections are governed by Revised Code 705.92. It requires the petition be signed by qualified electors equal in number to at least 15% of the total votes cast most recent regular municipal election. And then he's got some references here. Just because the Ohio Revised Code covers something does not mean the charter cannot also address it. For example, the Columbus Charter is different than the Ohio Revised Code. I don't know what that is, I didn't look it up. And depending on the topic, address it differently. Here's an interesting article about Bexley's recall discussion, or Charter Review Commission discussion on topic of recall elections, and there's a reference for that if anybody wants it.
So you said that he said ORC says 15%?
Which is even lower. Then it goes on to say, if the CRC wants to allow recall elections but have it governed by Ohio law, I recommend changing section 10.02 and specifically say recall elections of elected officials are allowed and will be governed by Ohio law. However, before this is done, the CRC should fully understand the impact of any change made. Here is a link to the Ohio Secretary of State's handbook on recalls. Now, we can make copies of all this, and so you have it if you want to do some, look up some of those references.
That'd be good.
Would you all
Do
want
you have
one?
that on electrons?
It was an email.
You could just forward the email.
I
I'm
can
I'm
forward
not
the
big
email.
on paper, I'm not a tree hugger, but I just don't.
I know what you mean, yeah, okay. Yeah, I'll just send it to her, let me.
That would be great if you could do that, that'd be easier.
Okay,
What was was that the only discussion about the recall, was that part? I noticed the comment about deleting, the end of the 10.02B, deleting what it says and tying it to the ORC. Is that, was that because of the 20%?
well, there was some indication from Tim that the council would like for us to consider raising that percentage.
Of course, they're the ones that can get recalled.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we all just kind of agreed that if you just followed what the state law was,
Yeah,
And
it's
state
just
law-
the simplest way to go.
well,
Now
But
perhaps,
if it's
now,
not-
now we've got a lower threshold.
that's lower than average.
Do we want that? Because at some point you have to have continuity of government too, to where
That's true.
it just can't be uprooted, an election can't be undone
At a
so
will.
easily. But, I mean, I have no strong opinion one way or the other. I'm just-
Yeah, it was a fine line we were walking because we want the voters, we don't want to make it difficult
Right.
or impossible to.
You raise the threshold, you're making it harder
Right, you're
to
making
recall
public
somebody
input.
that's valid.
Maybe,
And I
maybe
think
20 is
20% is fair.
the sweet spot. I don't know.
Yeah, there is that sweet spot, you're
Maybe
right.
20 is where it should be.
Well,
Right.
20
I
is
think
1 out
20
of
is
5
fair.
voters. 20 is 1 out of 5. I mean, it's
It's a fair number.
it's significant, but it's not an
Impossible.
overwhelming task.
Yeah.
No, but if 15% works for the whole state of Ohio, why shouldn't 15% work for the city?
And you could change the threshold to 15
Because to
without
me, if council,
just replacing the whole
That's
section.
just a call for an
It's likely
election.
to have a legal challenge in the future if we align ourselves with the state versus putting up something else that doesn't match.
I think it would be the other way.
You could change the
Don't
percentage.
I'm just saying, typically,
Yeah.
so,
We don't have to tie the section to the ORC in order to get the 15%. If we feel that 15% is the proper threshold, not 20, we just strike 20 and change it to 15, without saying recall in Pataskala is governed by ORC.
Right,
Because it basically is. But,
or match.
Unless it's defined.
of course, we all think
We
too.
don't have the ramifications of, like the law director is saying, there's if you delete this whole section and say it's only governed by the ORC, there's other ramifications you might not be aware of. We avoid that by just changing 20% to
That'd be the
15%.
simplest option, yeah.
But, keep in mind that the majority of council was hoping for a higher number, and then we come back with lower than what it is.
Yeah, they're gonna shoot it down.
They may fire us all.
Can they do that?
So I don't know, but it's something to think about. Maybe we don't have to make a final decision till you all have this.
Yeah, let's read it and maybe discuss it.
And kind of think about it a little bit more, and then
We can
maybe
circle back.
next meeting, we could make a final decision on that one. All right, so knowing that, as we review what we did with 9, 10, and 11, any comments, particularly, because 3 of you were out last time, so if you have any questions about it, it'd be good.
The only question I had was, in Article 11, 11.01C, the comment about where the charging official has reason to believe, we added language, say, if after consultation with the law director.
Because we were entertaining the scenario that, let's say, somebody says to the mayor, so-and-so on council did this. Well, instead of the mayor just saying, well, I think we ought to do something about that, they consult with the law director, who probably is going to look into what proof do we have, you know, how do we know this, is the person reliable?
Could speak to the prosecutor if there's an issue criminally or
Yeah,
otherwise.
yeah.
Yeah, the law director could answer as well, I mean, that's part of his
Right.
job too, so.
So we felt like it's just kind of a check and balance kind of thing. What if the mayor has it in for a certain council member, watches their removal? You know, we wanted to eliminate those things.
Yeah.
If we could.
My only thought, just a thought, was if we're requiring a consultation with the law director, what happens if the law director is not available? Should it say, if after consultation with the law director or anyone appointed to represent the law director
Or
in
his
her
designee.
absence or
Yeah.
something like that?
He may have a conflict of
By
interest.
doing that, we're requiring a consultation.
You could have a
before it
conflict
can
of
move
interest.
forward. You're trying to do something.
The law director is on a retainer for the city, he will be available. He's paid.
I agree with you.
Yeah, I think so.
95% of the
I
time.
think we're getting too much in the weeds.
I
Saying
think
if he's
that-
not available, then you have to do this. Now you're gonna.
But I thought there-
No, I
under-
agree with him, I think it should say
Or
designee,
designee.
because if the law director is out of town for a month because he's in Hawaii or
Uh-huh.
whatever.
If he's at a conference
Somebody.
and this timeline for removing somebody is in effect,
That's already addressed in the charter for if the law director is out for an extended period.
Yeah,
True.
In Chapter 6, I believe, it addresses that chain of command.
Yeah.
And then he would be the de facto law director while
Okay.
this guy's in Hawaii.
and every instance that I ever dealt with where the law director was on vacation or involved in trial and unavailable, they always named their
Some extent.
temporary replacement.
Right.
Always.
Okay.
Here's a little bit of what I have an issue with. So let's say a situation came up like you were talking about, okay? And there's, what does the charter say? We go in there and we say, okay, law director, they're out or whatever. Are we really gonna dig back to the other section that refers to what we do? You know, is that really what people do, or should we be specific in every section? I mean,
Could refer to the section that.
or refer back to the section about, you know, the procedure for when the law director's out or something. I just don't know, you know, it makes me uncomfortable when when we talk about, okay, what's already, you know, referred back in another, you know, section or chapter. That may be the case, but why do we have to do the scavenger hunt for, you know, all of that? It should be spelled out in each section that's relevant, or
Well,
see section
Yeah.
4.1.
And while the charter is available for everybody, the law director and the city administrator should be experts on it.
Absolutely, as should council members.
Yeah.
They should know it from the front to the back.
So, I don't know how to answer the question. I would think everything would be spelled out.
I mean, for me, I think I would rather err on the side of specifics than have the language too vague, or, you know, that just makes more sense
So
to me.
you're thinking a
right?
note added, C section, da.
Right, just,
I think that's for more of an extended absence. My thought was, this is pertaining to removing officials, and there's a timeline for doing so. And we're adding language that requires the charging official to consult with the law director in order to move forward with the removal. that is under a given timeline. So if we're requiring consultation and the guy just happens to be traveling,
Right.
But the timeline wouldn't start until the correct official or officials agreed upon.
That's when
went
it
forward.
starts, yeah.
That's when the timeline would
And like I
start.
said, whenever they're gone for any length of time, they always have someone who's appointed as their temporary replacement.
so
They're
they can't, so they
Usually
can't
somebody-
consult with that person, even though they're not the law director, and we're saying after consultation with the law director. Even though we're not saying
Well,
with,
we can say, or his or her designate.
that's all I was suggesting. Sounds like you guys aren't really in favor?
No, I think that's
I agree
okay.
with it.
It's good,
That's
it's
fine.
okay.
You think we're going into too much detail?
I don't care, we can add it if you guys want to. The law director, remember that on C?
Yeah.
All right. All right, anything else that? Okay. And any of the rest of the section 11?
Did we get an answer on 1102 about conflicts of interest, or was there a question that was raised there?
Where do you see that?
I just have it written to the side, conflicts of interest, question mark. Campaign financing penalties.
Oh, well, when we talked about the ethics law, it pretty well spells it out for council members and the mayor. And then financially, regular reports must be submitted, and they're pretty detailed, having filled those out before. They want to know, if you have a merge on your home, they want to know who it's with. I mean, there's a lot of detailed information that we have to fill out, or had to.
And
I
if
think
they
that's-
don't, they're fined
Oh,
by
yeah, the penalty's big for not filling out your
Yes.
report.
I will
think
tell
they
you-
do it to ward off conflicts.
And they notify me when the deadline is coming up, and we send out a notice and reminders to each council member and the mayor, all those that are elected, to make sure they fill those reports out.
So I think we felt it was covered by law.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else wish to say anything at all about the sections we reviewed last time, 9, 10, 11? And I will forward that email I got from Tim and the law director. I will probably do that tomorrow. Okay, so now we're ready to launch into Articles 4 and 5. So the right place here. I was just reviewing to see if council members didn't suggest anything for Article 4, but let's hear from you all. If your concerns about Article 4, let's try to go in order if we could. 4.01.
I have a question about, I don't know if you'll be able to help us with this or not. Maybe you can, Barb. I know that if they want an income tax takes our vote.
Correct.
But when it says in here levying a tax, what other taxes can council impose on us that we'd have no say on?
Gasoline tax at the, when they raise the tax on gas, so much a gallon. We can do that. Within, there's only a small.
Currently, we have imposed all
Oh,
those that
Oh, we
are
did that when
available.
I was on. And it has to be used strictly for streets and roads.
Okay. I was just curious.
I wouldn't say it's without us knowing either. I mean, it's within an ordinance, or
Right.
resolution.
Right.
With 3 readings and all out.
Take some digging, possibly, but.
Well, you see the agenda, you can see the agenda.
Right.
So, yeah, and you have an opportunity for public input 3 times before it's voted on. Appropriating money, that is one of the main jobs of council, is to determine the budget and make appropriations.
When we pass an ordinance, it takes 30 days to be effective.
Right.
In those 30 days, you have the right to file a petition in order to put that issue before the voters, if you disagree with it.
So that's about it, actually.
I was just curious what
Well,
all they
it's a
can
good
do
question. It's a good
without us voting on it.
I have a question in the next paragraph. In the first sentence, action by council which is not required by this charter to be taken by ordinance or which is not of general public application or interest, may be taken by resolution. So how do they decide what is not of general public application or interest?
Would you repeat that again? I was,
How
When
do you
they,
determine ordinance and resolution?
Yeah.
Different.
oh,
Yeah.
an ordinance is something of a permanent nature. A resolution is more temporary.
is there, so depending on how long they envision it lasting is whether it's more
Yes.
into resolution?
And an ordinance is more of a law, and that stays in place until it's amended, and it can only be amended by another ordinance.
Got it. Thank you.
Like you could do a resolution on, people in public places should wear masks during this COVID
Sure.
thing.
It's more of a temporary.
Right, whereas an ordinance would be something like, well, we're going to study the road situation to determine.
That can be
approve
to establish a stop sign at an intersection, something that is regulatory.
speed limits.
Mhm.
Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Okay. Good. So far, we've been able to handle it. Okay, hold on, section 4.02.
You got a conflict that I found, that I think the easiest resolution is just to combine the resolutions not in written form up there with 4.02, because in 4.02 it says they have to be written or printed, and then 2 paragraphs later it says if they're not in written form when they're introduced. So I think we need to clean that up and move that up from 4.04 and add it 4.02 and just say, if they're not in written form when they're introduced, then they will be later on.
Yeah, because that makes sense, they're talking about the same thing, so.
Yeah,
It's redundant.
Well, they do require signatures, so it has to be in
I think,
written form before they're signed and effective.
But 4.02 is referring to ordinances.
Or resolution.
4. Oh,
Yeah, it's both.
An ordinance has to be in,
At a regular special meeting, ordinances shall be in written or printed form.
correct,
All
It's not specific
resolutions
to resolutions.
don't have to be.
correct.
Because that's why in 404 it's saying resolution.
Oh,
not written.
ordinances have to be, resolutions will eventually be.
Because it says once reduced to written form, so it's,
So,
So I think it's two, four, seven.
So,
yeah,
we just leave it alone.
yeah, it's about, yeah. All right, how about 4.03? 4.04? 4.05.
I was looking at 4.02, 3. On 4.04, reading it on 3 separate days. I know they do that, but is it 3 separate meetings?
Yeah.
Yes,
That's just,
unless they waive the readings. Now, they can pass a motion to waive readings. To waive a reading, it takes a supermajority to do
when it
so.
says reading by title only, literally,
Yes. You'll have a title that describes what the legislation, the purpose of the legislation is at the top.
It's kind of
If,
summary.
is
if,
the point of that
anyone
is to
re-
give people chance to comment?
Yeah.
yes. And if there is a request, I have had to read the entire ordinance before, but it seldom happens,
Yeah.
because you have a pretty good description in the title.
Yeah, it's not just like a 2 or 3 word title.
Right.
It's like,
Not to mention
Brief-
the
brief
paperwork
summary.
you pick up at council has the whole
Yes.
ordinance written, so
Right.
you can actually read it yourself.
yeah, you can just go.
Right.
And any legislation being considered, with the exception of a resolution that may not be written, although we've never had that occur, those are available on the city website prior to the council meeting, so people can read the entire thing themselves if they choose to.
Okay, 4.05.
I'd like to know where it says that, where it's set forth in the charter about majority members of council, because nowhere in the charter does it say.
Simple majority.
Yeah, it doesn't, anywhere it doesn't say what a majority is.
What's the difference?
There's only one place in the entire charter that says how many council members it requires to do anything. Only one place, and that's a disciplinary action for a city employee. And that takes 5 affirmative votes. But nowhere else in the charter does it say,
It's just because it's a simple majority. If
Mhm.
you have 5 people, a majority's 3. If you have 7, a majority's 4.
What's the?
Now, with our ordinances, they require 4 votes.
see, it doesn't say that in here. It doesn't say anywhere what the requirement is.
But it
I
says
think
that
there's a
there's
place-
7, establishes 7 council members. We agree with that.
Right.
So the majority would be 4.
So the ordinance requires a majority of council, should be 4, and a resolution requires a majority
Like
of
Barb
those
said, once
present.
2 of us are
Correct.
gone, now can I pass an ordinance with having only 5 council members here? That's where I'm getting at.
No, the ordinance says it has to be a majority of council, not council president,
Not
council.
council president, yeah.
Okay.
But the resolution's different. The resolution
do-
requires a
we can
majority
do a
of the
motion.
present, council members
Yes.
present.
We
With
can
the
do
members
motions
present.
on a simple majority of present.
So
Did you do a
what is
resolution?
supermajority as opposed to simple?
Supermajority, that is 5 members.
5. Okay.
And those are required when you're doing something like waiving readings or something along those lines.
We could pretty well kind of have agreement on those, because that always happens. And it does say in the charter somewhere that ordinance require 4.
Yes.
Okay, does that answer your question then?
Mhm.
Okay, all right. Content of emergency legislation 4.06, comments on that one. Looks like that you had a couple of them.
Well, I just want to know if we're going to do emergency legislation. I would think that in an emergency, it would just be something temporary and ordinance. And as a matter of fact, earlier in this exact meeting, you described quite well what an ordinance is. That's permanent in nature. Should we be passing ordinances during an emergency situation?
Not usually.
So should we clean that up and say, we make emergency temporary actions to carry us through?
I think if
The
it's something we
situation.
want to be able to enforce with the PD,
It has to be.
it has to be an ordinance.
What they brought up was if the federal government, let's just say as an example, sends us $100,000, we have a bridge washed out or whatever, and they send us $100,000, the
Yeah.
state sends it, we can make an emergency move to spend that money and fix that bridge.
Yeah.
And maybe I'm I'm just being very rudimentary about how I'm explaining it,
No,
but
you're
that
right.
was what I heard explained, was that defines an emergency. It's not sirens and whatever, it's not a typhoon or anything like that. It's, we've got money and we gotta spend it today, and we can't wait around.
And
Yes.
then there are cases, if anybody's worked with grants before, they're not notoriously given advance notice too much.
It pops out,
Yeah, they say, whoa, in 30 days, if you apply for this grant, we'll match your funds 50/50, we'll match your funds, and you can do a big project. Well, whoa, we need to do a big project, and if we don't get this passed quickly, we'll miss the deadline. So,
Gives them flexibility
yeah, I
in
think
an
it does.
extraordinary situation.
Yeah, the time I was on council, I never saw that misused. I really, I don't.
They are very careful about that.
Yes.
They want to, I can tell you, for the years I've been there doing this job, since 1998, they are very careful about how they use that. And to allow, their biggest concern is allowing the citizens the opportunity to speak on the issue. So it takes something very serious for them to waive readings.
And isn't it also true that if you pass emergency legislation, it's effective immediately, you don't wait 30 days?
That's correct.
And so when you're talking about police ordinance, or you're talking about an emergency,
You can
or
do two
grants.
different ways. You can waive readings, but that 30 days is
Stays.
still in effect.
Yeah.
You have 30 days to file a referendum. If it's an emergency, you don't have those 30 days.
So I wouldn't really be in favor of taking that tool away from council, because I believe that they're very cautious about it. And I think the law director and the administrator would urge that.
And for it to be an emergency, it has to be explained what the emergency is in the legislation. And it's very particular on it.
And why we need it to be.
Yes,
Yeah.
why it needs to be addressed as an emergency.
Okay. 407? 408?
Maybe add a sentence at the end that says electronic signature is also an acceptable means.
I'm sorry. Is it?
I don't have it in front of me to know.
Well, it just simply says that it's going to be signed by the
You think that?
president of
covers it?
council and the clerk, so, but he said add electronic signatures. Do you do that now, or?
No, we don't.
But would you be prevented, you wouldn't be prevented from doing so under the current language, would you? The fact that it says authenticated by the signature doesn't have to be a wet signature.
As long
If
as-
in the future, we decide, within the next 5 years, we
Yeah.
decide to use electronic signature.
Well, it's a signature.
Yeah, and it's dated and time, encrypted, so.
And there's a lot of legal things you do as an individual that you can sign electronically. Important things,
Mhm.
so.
So what are we doing? We're in 408.
So as long as there's a
We can leave it
signature.
as is, if we're all in agreement,
Leave it
it's
there.
read that way.
We're not gonna add in, we're not adding in electronic signature?
No, because it's still a signature.
Okay, all right,
It still counts, yeah.
okay.
All right. 409. .410.
The only thing I would do is just add in, at the end of section 406, we just add in the chapter description. So when you're reading, comply with section 406, you don't just go back up and go, what the heck's 406? You'll see that 406 is emergency legislation appropriation.
So you think it should be, the whole thing should be, or
The-
just the title?
The heading.
I'm just saying add in the heading after
Oh,
section
okay.
406 for just easier
Oh, I
reading.
see, I see.
Just easier reading.
Do you know throughout the document though, does it typically add the heading when it
I've
refers
been
to
doing
another
it
section?
as the times when it references something,
We've
I've
done
been
it.
making sure it's
Yeah.
there.
We've done it for some other.
Yeah.
Makes sense. What about the way that sentence reads? And where it says, "Of this charter shall be permitted and required." Seems like permitted doesn't make any sense. Shall be required. If you're gonna require it, of course you're gonna permit it. I would strike permitted and then put a comma after required. So the charter shall be required unless the pending ordinance.
And leave out permitted and.
Yeah, it reads better.
What else do you think?
Yeah, it's just, it's a double statement where you don't need it. You're saying it's required unless it complies with 406.
All right.
Okay, I got a note of it.
All right, 4.11. And that would be the 5. That would be the number 5. That's how many it would require. So that's clear to everybody now?
So that's a super majority.
It is.
So why wouldn't we just say super majority? Are we ever gonna expand the number of council members? And we've got 7 now. I mean, I don't see that happening.
Right.
I doubt it, I don't know what we're talking about.
If you go back to the beginning and redoing the charter.
Right, you know.
Yeah, so for now,
I think it's pretty common part when it says the supermajority, but throughout the document it says 2/3.
yeah, it's consistent. Okay. 4.12.
I agree with Mitch's comment that you have 2 duplicate sections, and it seems like the second one is what they intended.
It's bigger.
Yeah.
Government never gets smaller.
Right.
The second one covers the first one
Yeah.
plus a little bit.
And then we just add our generic statement about websites and social media like we discussed the last meeting.
Right,
I'll
be
add that at the
consistent.
end. Okay. And we're gonna get rid of the first duplicate paragraph.
Everybody okay with that?
Mhm.
Okay. All right. Anything else on Article 4? Okay, we're gonna go to Article 5. Mayor Administrator. 5.01.
Yeah.
5.02. I'm not following how you think the mayor and a couple of council members can pass something.
Well,
It has.
That's because when I see, with my military background, when I see emergencies, the legislation, and then Steve said, don't think sirens under emergency, it's the emergency expenditure of funds. So when that got cleared up, then that made that other comment null and void. Because it wasn't about emergencies with sirens because we had a derecho or whatever, and now we've got chaos in the streets and no
It's,
power.
we got to move quickly on the legislation
Yeah,
side of it.
okay. So you're striking that.
Right, with my military and the National Guard and all that, when I see emergency, that just kind of like
I
what
know.
we did.
I know.
I'm like, oh God, emergency. Call out the guard.
That's 502, 503.
Just a formatting to bold that section 503, mayoral vacancies.
Yeah. All right, so what are you saying?
On 503, to make the heading bold,
Oh,
just a formatting.
Yeah.
Bold and in all caps.
It's consistent with the rest of the document.
yeah. Okay. Anything else in 503? All right, 504, city administrator. Mitch had a note on E.
Yeah, I think that's a total conflict of interest. It even says in some of the commissions and everything, that the city administrator may sit in, participate, and help clarify any
But no
board and
vote.
commission, no vote. And now down here, we're saying, well, if council says it's okay, he can now be a member of a board or a commission. I don't think that that's right. To me, that says conflict of interest. You should provide your input and then let the other people make the decisions.
So like the way it reads here, council approves, the city administrator could also be the planning and zoning director.
Or it could be on the charter review commission, you know, if they said it was okay. I don't think that that's right.
I think it's in place in case they have to have someone temporarily do
Acting.
a position like that, which I think we've done in the past, haven't we, Kathy?
I don't recall having had the administrator sit in on any board or commission.
Seems unlikely
He-
to come up.
He might give guidance or answer questions, but
Right.
no
Not-
vote.
No vote, and not actually on the. committee.
Correct.
All right, and then here you're saying he's allowed to be.
With council.
Right.
So you're saying to strike E,
That would be my suggestion.
or just simply say, may not hold any other office or position, period?
If you just strike it, it's the same difference. All you're doing there is you put a little ollie oxen free in there to say, if we want to, we can put the city administrator on any council or board that we want to, with 2/3 of us saying, let's do it.
But if we don't speak to it, if we don't say that they may not hold another position, and since we're talking about the city administrator, this would be the place. Maybe
This
we
is
should-
only for the city administrator?
Yes, that's what,
So then just.
There has been-
Okay, then let's just do with the city, period.
that's what I'm saying.
And then just get rid of unless
Unless
council
they-
approves.
yeah.
Is that acceptable?
Can you say
I
that
think it
again?
should stay as is personally.
If, yeah.
Why, you think council should be able to?
If they need to, if somebody's qualified to hold another position within the city, in the rare case that they can't find anybody else, and the city administrator happens to be qualified enough to hold another position, and they agree with that, the person wants to hold two positions, and a supermajority of the council agrees.
Didn't Ray Withers do that?
I thought he-
You have, one thing that comes up from time to time, if the city administrator leaves and you have an acting, it can be one of our directors that fills that position on a temporary basis.
So, yeah, I think it's.
I think it just allows them to keep
The
things.
flexibility.
Yeah.
I mean, councils.
That's true, we've had that a few times. Because sometimes the city administrator will.
Now, we have,
Yeah.
we have passed ordinances that, that sets up the perimeters in order to appoint an acting director or an acting administrator, so.
But the instance I'm thinking of, Ray was in charge of the, water and sewer,
Mhm.
and acted,
That's been a while ago.
I know.
We have had that, and they have set up a certain income for doing the extra job.
Like a stipend.
Yes, it's usually like $50 a day additional. It's,
Oh, yeah.
When
they
you
really
say
wanna come and do
temporary-
two jobs, so.
When you say temporary, how temporary was that?
till the position can be filled.
Because then you have to do a search.
Because that could be 6 months.
It can be.
It can be.
So is there any sort of,
It's hard to put a limit on it because you don't know what applicants you're going to get, and you might not get the first round, anyone that's qualified for that position, and you may have to re-advertise, so it's difficult.
are there quality measures put in place to
Yes.
prevent quality, to conflict or anything like that?
Yes, the
Right.
the job description is pretty detailed and what the qualifications are for that position.
But somebody is monitoring that
Yes,
situation, okay.
yes.
Yeah, so in that respect,
We'd have to keep that
I
in
think
mind.
we better make it, you know, just, again, we'd be tying their hands if the case came up, which doesn't happen very often. They do get other job offers sometimes for more money.
And sometimes you're not expecting it, and it
That's
just
right.
comes up.
I'm like, you're gonna what? Okay, 5.05. I think, Mitch, you have a question in B11.
I think B should be struck, the entire thing, that's a job description. And if you ever want to keep, or if you want to change his job description, you have to change the charter.
No, I don't agree with that. I mean, again, you know me, I'm always gonna say specifics over anything, and I like the fact that that's spelled out this way in the charter. I think you can always add to a job description because that comes from a different place. But I think for the purposes of the charter, that the detail of this should stay.
And these are probably the basic, these are the minimum requirements.
Very minimum requirements.
more.
I bet,
Job
you
description
know,
itself.
right. I don't think, I think removing that would be a mistake.
If you're talking about a position that is a contracted position, the more details are in that contract when those are worked out.
Anything else on? Anything else on 5.05?
Under D, it says that the administrator may attend the Planning and Zoning Commission and zoning appeals. Shouldn't we change that to read that they can attend all the meetings, boards, and commissions? Because other than the fact that he may have been exposed to COVID, he would have been here tonight. So,
And he pretty well does go.
so shouldn't we just make
Committee
make that
meetings.
more all-encompassing, that he's more than welcome as a subject matter expert to attend the park board meeting? I know my wife, she's a member of the park board, and she says he's there at those meetings to help out, and,
So you're.
May, but should not be required. And
Right, but I mean, at least you're saying in the charter, he's welcome to
Yes.
attend and help and provide the expertise.
yes,
Maybe just add a sentence, just, you know, he may.
Yeah, that's what I'm
Participate
thinking.
in any committee,
Sure.
city committee, whatever.
Chance to read all meetings, boards,
Instead of just
commissions,
planning and zoning,
et cetera.
yeah.
yeah.
Okay. I'll
That sounds
wordsmith that one and keep that as something that will.
Is there ever something that he wouldn't? I don't know what it would be. but
I don't know what it would be. You wouldn't
when you
want
throw the
him,
word all, you kind of want to all-proof that. I mean,
If it were something that were specific in regards to the city, council would probably go into executive session.
yes.
Yeah,
So-
and invite him in or not invite him in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At that point.
okay.
And I think if you look at section 121.22G1, which deals with personnel, they have to give them the option for a public hearing.
Yeah. Even if they do an executive session.
Yes.
To discuss it, they still gotta do that. But, yeah, I can't think of any commission or board that they should.
And keep in mind that any board or commission is a public body, and those meetings are open to anyone.
Anything else at all on 4 or 5? Okay. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, September 23rd at 7 o'clock. And what do we propose our topics to be?
You just want to do 6 and 7?
Yeah.
Makes sense, right?
Could do 6, 7, 8.
Oh, yeah, because we did 9, 10, 11. I was thinking we did 8,
Yeah.
9, 10.
We did 9, 10, 11.
Right. You want to do 6, 7, 8?
Sounds good.
Okay, let me fill you in a little bit more on what I'm doing. Well, the mayor was here because he helped set up this room for our meeting tonight. I asked him what were the expectations as far as council is concerned about how we're doing or whatever. And I mentioned that, you know, did they want an update? And he said that he thought that would be great to have an update. And the next time the council meets is Monday, the 21st. So he said, will you be there? And I said, yes, I did him a calendar with me tonight. So I don't think I have something scheduled on the 21st. So I said, yeah, he said I could come and speak to them at citizens' comments, which is at the beginning of the meeting. So if any of you would like to be in attendance at that meeting, you know, to show that here's your commission. If you've got the time and don't have a conflict and you want to be there, then
What date is that again?
it's Monday the 21st in council chambers at
7 p.m.
7 p.m. And it'll be early on, so before they do the main section of the meeting.
In the first citizen comments.
Yeah, and, you know, I'll keep it brief. I'm not gonna go into detail about what we've done, because I think that,
It's gonna bring up too many questions.
It's gonna bring up too
Prefer
much.
to give them everything at once.
we're right, and say, this is what we've done, and we're done with it.
Yes.
And you have it now. Whereas if I start doing details, what if we go back later and change our mind on something?
Right.
So I don't think we want to do that, so.
Speaking generalities.
I will speak in generalities, And,
Be present to get recommendations, like if they think of something that they want us to look at, or.
right, and tell them when we're meeting again, and if they wanna sit in on it, they're welcome to do that, just like any other member of the public. So that's the news on here. Is there a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
Second? Okay. Our meeting's adjourned. See you on the 21st.
Guys, you know, I've been trying to